Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Productivity Mastery. Stoyan is here with you, and as always, I'm on a mission to bring you some of the most interesting guests out there and cover some of the most important topics, one of which, obviously, is AI. Everybody's talking about AI, especially in the last 6 months.
A
Is
little bit
AI
less.
a bit less, maybe? Yes.
Yeah.
So, is it going to take over our jobs? When is that going to happen? Is it going to take over the world? That's not the topics that probably we're going to be covering, but we're going to go a lot more practical with my guest today. Tim, I hope I pronounce your name correct. Tim Berce?
Yeah, that's fine. Bercy, yeah.
Berce. Tim Berce,
Sure.
my guest, is a co founder of Automated Content. He has a diverse background in marketing, beginning his career in direct response marketing and later serving as the head of email marketing for a large international digital marketing agency. He also worked as a head of content for a leading multinational retailer where he led content teams and developed B2C and B2B strategies. As a co founder of Automated Content, Tim now focuses on building fine tuned AI language models, paving the way for the future of AI generated content. He blew my mind together with his friend Maya Voye a few weeks ago in North Macedonia. Thank you, Swissy P, for bringing us together um, as experts on this founders retreat. So it's been really interesting to see what he has to share and what he's working on. So I really wanted to bring him in. And one of the reasons is, I mean, this podcast is about productivity, right? We need to know what's coming. And AI, if utilized appropriately, can really simplify our lives. Of course, there's a lot of other considerations we have to keep in mind. But Tim, good morning, first of all. How are you?
Good morning, Stone. I'm great. Thank you. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
I'm super excited about it, man. So let's dig into it. Tell me about your background. So you've been a marketer, you've been a copywriter. How did you get into AI at the first place?
Okay, so yeah, I started with writing a lot of copy in the direct response niche. So selling a lot of courses, supplements, things like that. Then I kind of started, working with an agency where we were selling all kinds of products for companies all around the world, from really expensive kitchen knives to fashion to high-end fashion accessories, and just really a broad scope of products. And then back in December, I started getting a lot of emails from my copywriting mentors, all talking about this new tool called ChatGPT and how whether or not it was going to replace copywriters. And I was super interested whether or not my potential job or skill set was in danger of being completely automated. So I decided to give it a try, and that's how really essentially my journey into AI started. I had a lot of I think I had a little bit of an advantage because of my background, because I think there's two things or maybe three things that really essentially make somebody good at using AI when it comes to generated copy. The first is a little bit of knowledge in programming, and I've been programming since I was in primary school. The second thing is really knowing how to write good copy to give great examples to it. And then the third is essentially being able to systemize your content, where you're able to essentially create SOPs out of how to write copy. And then, by having those SOPs, well, as it turns out, GPT is pretty good at understanding SOPs and exact, step-by-step guides, which really helps you to essentially, create much better content with it.
Excellent. I want to start maybe with giving a bit of a context to the audience. What is the stage of ChatGPT for? What is, like, if you can kind of give us an overview about the main capabilities, what are we capable to do with ChatGPT for?
Okay, sure. So essentially, the GPT model is built on a really advanced sort of technology that we can use to process words. Like before like 2017, that's when things really got started. This problem was being dealt with at Google. they were essentially having, they were building a translation model, a translation tool, Google Translate, right? They wanted to find the best way to translate content from, from say, let's say English to other languages, which change certain words depending on the gender, like most European languages, right? And before 2017, we were kind of looking at each word separately. So you would look at one word and try to translate that. And then, in 2017, they introduced this paper called "Attention is All You Need," which is kind of a meme name, released from Google's laboratory. And they introduced the transformer architecture, which essentially lets us look at the entire sentence at once, which provides a lot more context and just makes translations a lot easier. But as it turns out, by having this capability of simultaneously looking at different things, you're able to kind of better guess and make better choices when it comes to the output of the content. So right now, a lot of things are being done in the language space. So things like ChatGPT generating content. Some of it is going on, in the image creation space, like tools like Midjourney, where they're able to create really beautiful artworks essentially just from a short prompt. To also music, Google recently talked about releasing a tool that generates music for you. So, this technology, this transformer architecture, we can essentially use it to teach it a lot of different stuff, from writing copy to, generating music to generating artworks and all of that. So we're, right now we're kind of at a stage where all of these tools are being massively, very, very quickly developed at a massive scale all around the world. And we're just seeing it, just kind of integrate into society in all different aspects. I don't think we're, close to having it integrate into all of our systems yet, but I do think there's many, many opportunities that we haven't seen yet that are going to get developed over time. So this new architecture, the transformer, this is what essentially lets us kind of teach a machine to do really human level work on a broad scope of things, anything from obviously reading documents and writing content and classifying documents and image generation, music generation, all of those good things. But we can also use it for tools like programming, right? Or just essentially any sort of mental work that we're doing right now. We could teach it strategy, things like that. We could teach it to do that with the transformer architecture and get surprisingly good results. Like, everyone was really surprised with ChatGPT when it first came out, and Midjourney and tools like that, when they were just, blown away at how amazing some of that content can be. And I'm sure that, in the, next few months and years, as more of these fine-tuned models come out, we'll be very surprised at how well it can handle all kinds of things pertaining to our jobs and the work that we do.
And it's kind of crazy, as you said, how many new things are coming out every week. I wonder, how do you keep up so you are, updated on all the state-of-the-art new technologies coming out? What do you do to make sure that you kind of try the new tools and you're on top of things?
All right, so there's so much stuff coming out like on a weekly basis that I don't really have the time to test all of these. One thing that I've noticed is there's a lot of people that kind of aggregate that content and let me know about new stuff coming out. So I subscribe to a lot of people. I follow different people that really talk about the new tools coming out, just so that I have one eye open to see whether or not something would be pretty useful to use. Otherwise, I have a pretty clear focus on where I see this technology going and a specific use case that we're trying to solve. I think there's going to be many different use cases when it comes to this technology, but there's one that we've kind of narrowed down on, which is just creating content, fine-tuning AI models to create way better content.
Excellent. So, Tim, why don't you give us a bit of an overview of how you use AI? How did you start it? Like, now that you saw maybe like 4 or 5 months ago, ChatGPT coming out, and on a day-to-day basis, how do you use it in your work?
Okay, sure. So, I started off just like I think everybody else. I remember, when I was getting those emails in the beginning of December, I think it started already in the first week of December, and, ChatGPT got released on the last day of November. So it's been really crazy, like the past three months or so. since its release. And I started just like everyone else. Everyone is super hyped about this technology, and I kind of opened it up, and I set myself a really simple challenge. I wanted to use prompts to write a newsletter, right, for a buy one get one free deal for an e-commerce store. And I figured, that's a pretty simple challenge. If everybody kind of knows what those emails are supposed to look like, because if we open up your inbox, you can take a look at how e-commerce stores send out emails, and it's usually not a lot of copy and a lot of visuals to make the emails really pop and beautiful and all of that. And I figured, that's a simple challenge as any. And I asked it. I essentially just wrote, write an email for a buy one get one deal on pillows, and wanted to see what I get out of it. And I just got a huge block of text, right? So it was totally not usable, and I couldn't really understand at that point what was the actual use case. Yes, the chat was super interesting. You could ask it a bunch of questions, like ask it for a recipe, it'll spit back one out really quickly. So it was impressive in certain ways, but when it came to the actual work that I was doing, I couldn't really specifically find a specific use case for it. Wasn't really sure how this is actually useful. So that's when I started studying a little bit about what these tools are, what are language models, what is machine learning, and what do we actually mean when we say AI. And I figured a couple of things really early on, which was that these tools aren't really good at writing, but they're really good at guessing words. And the interesting part, where these tools become very, very interesting, is that you can affect the guesswork of this machine by essentially giving it different context, which means that it can learn from your input and provide an output that's kind of tailored to what you asked it to do. And that's a really important thing.
Can you give me an example? Can you give me an example of what could that look like?
So let's imagine you want ChatGPT to finish a sentence, right? And let's say that sentence is, I like to travel, that's why I'm going to use the blank to go to New York, right? And it's going to come up with a list of different words. And one of those words might be airplane, right? Another one might be a hot air balloon. Another one might be a bicycle, right? And then it's going to assign probabilities to each of those words. And in this case, it's probably going to rank airplane really high and bicycle probably pretty low, right? And according to that list, it's going to pick the one that has the highest probability of being the correct word, and it's going to finish our sentence and say something like, I like to travel, that's why I'm going to use the airplane to go to New York. But if you kind of talk to ChatGPT before asking this question, and you tell it that you're a huge enthusiast about hot air ballooning and how you want to travel the world with a hot air balloon, it's going to assign different probabilities to those words, and might finish the sentence by saying, I like to travel, that's why I'm going to use the hot air balloon to go to New York. So that's an example of it being able to take some of your context, some of the stuff that you're giving it, and learn based on that, and then give you a personalized response around that. So that's something that kind of showed me that these tools can actually learn. And when I figured out that it can learn, the next question that I had was, well, how do you teach it? How do you teach it to write? That was the big challenge that I was dealing with, because obviously when I gave it a straight up challenge, write me a newsletter, it completely failed at that. So I wanted to know, is there a way for me to teach it how to write, the new, content and copy that I'd like it to write about? And as it turns out, you can, with something called fine tuning, which is where I think the biggest use cases for this technology are right now.
It's super interesting. When it came out, there were all these use cases. For example, somebody will say, give me a summary of the Iranian revolution in 3 pages using Donald Trump as he's saying it, right? And of course, it has a lot of data on Donald Trump, right? Already, probably. So it was like, it's the greatest revolution. So it was actually sounding like him, right? So yep. And when I saw you and Maya a few weeks ago in North Macedonia actually playing with it, it was really interesting what you guys did. Like, for example, one of the examples that you guys used was like you see a really interesting LinkedIn post of somebody really well structured, and then you feed it to the model,
Yeah.
and then you ask it to create an identical post, but with the information that you wanted to create. So can you maybe give us this example, because these are practical things that the audience can maybe
Of
benefit
course,
from?
yeah, sure. So, just like everyone else, I tried to play with all of these prompts, right? And I really thought that prompt engineering was where this industry is going to go to, right? That we're going to have to get really great at creating amazing prompts that are going to lead to much better content. And as it turns out, that's not really true. It is in a way, but not really where I think the use cases are going to be. Prompt engineering is important to a certain extent, but it's really not going to help you unless you're dealing with a model that can already kind of write. So the easiest way to kind of fine tune a model, um, the manual way, let's call it, is to simply give it an example of the type of content that we're trying to generate. So you could take, any sort of content. You could take a newsletter, you can take a LinkedIn post, you could take a Facebook ad, a product description, a blog post, whatever you're trying to create. And you can essentially tell it, hey, I'm going to give you an example of a text, and I want you to use this as a guide to follow it as closely as possible, but change it so that, and then you can provide more details around that. And then by giving it that example, just one example, it's already going to sort of structure the end result to more of the format that you're looking for. So it's going to understand whether or not it's super short, where the headlines are, what's the context of each sentence, how they link together, and it's going to follow that, and it's going to create something that's really close to what you're hoping for. Now, that's just giving it one example, and it's remarkable how much better it becomes at generating content when you just give it one example. But if you go through this process, fine tuning is actually a relatively simple concept to explain. It's giving it many different examples of the type of content that you'd like it to generate, and then based on that, it can really learn about how to write and structure content that's super useful to you. So that's essentially it. We first want to kind of teach it by giving it examples of what we want it to create, and then based on that, we can ask it to write more of our stuff and just change the parameters, so our needs, the specific topic or language style, or the tips that we're sharing, or whatever it is.
Do you usually have to have multiple prompts, or like you can actually nail it from the get-go? Like, does it take a bit of time to get to the place that you want to be?
So you can actually get it to generate sort of perfect, let's say perfect content in a single prompt. But it takes a little bit of prompt engineering on a fine-tuned model to get there. So you kind of want to you teach it how to write. You go through the process of fine-tuning. You give it a lot of examples on how to write about, and then you want to structure the prompt to be sort of a single prompt. You just want to push it to it once, and if you see that it makes mistakes, you can kind of go back and edit the prompt to make sure that all of the information that it needs about what to do and what not to do is already contained inside the prompt. And then essentially on a fine-tuned model, you can just give it a single prompt and it's going to reply with pretty good content. Like it's surprisingly good. It's considerably better than just working with a normal non-fine-tuned model. And I gave this example at a conference that I was speaking at. It was like 400 people last week, and I gave them two examples of an email. And one of the emails was written by a fine-tuned GPT model, and the other was written by a human copywriter. And I asked them, which is which? Like, which one was the email that was generated by GPT? And half of the people thought it was version A. Half of the people thought it was version B, which kind of shows how it's essentially nearly impossible to tell which is which. Just yesterday, I was speaking at a company event for EOS. And they went even worse. Like they were 70-30 towards the human version, so they got it completely wrong. 70% of the people thought that the human version was written by GPT. So it becomes incredibly difficult to tell this content apart, especially by humans. Which means that at this stage, you can already create sort of human level content that performs really well. Like the specific example that I gave them. The newsletter performed a little bit better than a human. when it came to the open rate, the click rate, the actual sales that was generated, which is incredible that we're able to generate content with a single prompt that essentially can outperform or at least equal the performance of a human copywriter.
That is super interesting, man. I wonder, there's some industries, some areas that AI is not there yet, right? It's getting there, but as you said, there are certain areas, industries, activities that AI is already there and can be utilized. Can you give us some, for an inspiration, right? Some of the ideas, use cases, where could we utilize AI today that can support and help our jobs?
Okay, so like yesterday at that event, the company went through a bunch of brainstorming sessions on how to develop systems inside the company to integrate AI into it, and I was kind of blown away at how quickly they were able to come up with practical solutions to problems they have. And some of the maybe a little bit less obvious stuff, apart from generating content, is classifying documents. Imagine you receive a lot of legal documents and you need to go through them and just pull out the important stuff out of that. Well, you can teach GPT to do that, right? Instead of you just scan a document or give it or send a PDF to it, and it can spit out the important facts back to you. So summarizing stuff, or then just classifying it. For example, let's say you work in customer support and you get an email from a customer, and you could classify that email, figure out what the exact problem is. You could store that information and then reply appropriately and help the customer with whatever issue they have. So things like that, just create completely personalized flows and experiences for people. We've been talking about personalizing content for a long time in marketing, right? For example, the email marketing, the big thing was, you're supposed to build automations and personalize them to each segment. Well, now you can essentially personalize it to every single subscriber, which is just, a huge step up from the capabilities that we had before. Because if at any point a customer reaches out or says anything, for example, let's say, here's, it's sort of a strange example, but let's say a customer were to write in, send an email to support, to the customer support, and then the next time you send out a newsletter, just announcing a sale, you could start it with, "Hey Stoyan, I hope we've managed to resolve your issue yet. Here's what's happening at our side. We're running this sale. Do you want to be part of it?" All of that stuff, and you could really personalize the experience for every single subscriber that way. That I think that's one big use case. The other is just creating content at scale, right? A lot of companies are bottlenecked by the amount of content that they can put out by just, huge, by, essentially not having enough copywriters, or, because sometimes it might be difficult to hire them. In those cases, you could essentially teach the model to write content. And then from there, you could just generate a lot more content very, very quickly by working with these models. I think moving forward, I think there's going to be a lot more interesting stuff coming out as well. One of which I think, I'm pretty confident Facebook should be moving in this direction, which is they could use this transformer architecture that was developed, right? And they could teach it how to run Facebook campaigns, advertising campaigns, based on, they could take, the top 100 companies in advertising in every single niche and sort of train the model to be able to handle those accounts independently. I think that's where we are moving towards, a world where all of these companies are going to start to integrate this technology. They're going to build their own data sets. So not just language models, but, everything, but just everything built on the transformer architecture that can just completely automate a lot of the aspects of our lives and work.
For good or bad, we are going there. But I wanna go back to the first example you gave, which was the subscribers, or like the personalized reply to whatever email
Sure.
response, email marketing. How, like, for the normal person out there, there's many entrepreneurs listening to the podcast, right? There's many, not necessarily technical people. So you said automated, yet in the head of a normal person, it's like you still have to manually put it into ChatGPT or whatever software, whatever, and bring it back to like, what are the other tools, or how do you automate so that I mean, does it have to be any human involved? And if there is no human
Yeah.
involved, is there the risk that it can actually go wrong?
Yeah. Okay, cool. Great questions. So at this stage, I think most companies are going to opt into having more manual control over it, just so they can test it out and see how it works, right? As they see that, this technology can produce amazing content, because in your prompts, you can really limit it where it can go, and that's how you can limit the number of mistakes that it could potentially make. And by limiting those mistakes, you can get very reliable content out of it. So I think, but I think like in this stage, people are still kind of apprehensive when it comes to AI generated content, and that's why probably in the first stage things are going to look like what we've kind of developed for one company, which is essentially, they open up our app, which was fine tuned on their emails, and they can pick, fine tune on their content, and they can pick the type of content that they would like to output. Let's say an email in this case. And when they pick an email, they could pick the type of email that they'd like to generate. Right? For example, the start of a sale or the end of a sale, or anything like that. And then they just input the basic stuff, which product category is on sale, how long the sale lasts, and what the coupon code is, right? And then that's all they need to click generate, and then get an email that performs nominally, that has essentially the same performance as if it were written by a human, because it was trained on their own data. It was trained on their own content. It's really great at taking data like that and just outputting back content that's extremely similar, sometimes even better than what humans can write. So I think at this stage, we're kind of looking at a workflow like that. So essentially, imagine having an internal application, that web app that you can log into, and then that already contains the fine-tuned model, and then you can just input very basic stuff, so stuff that a project manager would do instead of a copywriter, for example. So a project manager usually will write a certain set of rules or tasks that a copywriter needs to do, but this time, instead of giving it to the copywriter, the project manager could directly input this into the fine-tuned model, and then get an output out extremely quickly. Like we're talking in seconds instead of maybe hours or days it would take a copywriter to get to that task and work on it, right? So we're already able to kind of, to some extent, eliminate the copywriter from this workflow and go straight to the project manager. But if bear with me, we could go one step beyond and fine tune the model on the marketing calendars, for example, of a specific company. And if we take data for the last year or so, we're able to create a new marketing plan from scratch, right? From all of the data that they've already created, all of the events that they have, everything like that. And then we're able to essentially also feed that information back into the fine-tuned model, and we could get it to just automatically come up with campaigns, potentially push them to an email marketing program and send them out, or schedule them as well, which could lead to complete automation. I think the solutions already exist there. They're not super difficult to build, because we've discovered this, or Google has discovered this amazing technology, which is the transformer architecture. And based around that, yeah, we could potentially completely automate every step of the way when it comes to the strategy, to the actual content, for essentially any company.
Yeah, and I can imagine there'll be many automated tools that will coming out in the upcoming months, right?
I think like with these tools, and I think some of them are absolutely great. I think like one that I found really useful was released by Adobe, which essentially uses AI to just clean up the sound of any recording that you make. And you can take your cell phone in a super echoey room, just record it, and then you go to, I think it's called Enhance. I think it's Adobe Enhance, and you can give it that recording, which is just full of terrible sound, and it will clean it up remarkably well, right?
No,
so
really?
that's you should definitely give it a try, Stoyan. Like, but it's like for videos, for ads, for podcasts, everything like that. Like this can work incredibly well. Like it's surprisingly good. And that's an example of an AI tool. Now, where I'm kind of apprehensive about most of these tools is that they're built on the generic GPT framework. So GPT 3.5 for now, like the 4.0 is considerably better. It's still not available for everyone via API. But they're not built on fine-tuned models, which means that they're going to provide essentially generic content at best. Where I think real opportunity is, and what I like, if I were to predict where we're going with this, companies in the future will have their own AI teams working on fine-tuning these models for every single area of the company, and you'll essentially have senior staff that are going to take care of this technology, provide more examples or use cases, and just build around that, and just have that kind of run the company sort of on its own under the supervision of senior folk. I think that's where we're moving. That's the direction that we're moving into. And that's why I think like fine tuning is such an important concept, and something that most companies will have to build teams around internally to be able to fine tune these models on their own data to get them to really produce content that's tailored to them, that looks exactly like what they've been producing so far. Especially, if imagine you essentially teach it on your best content, on your best performing ads, on your best performing emails, landing pages, etc. You're able to get it to create like really amazing content out of that. And that's where I think we're going. I think that's the direction that we're going into. I don't think like most of the generic tools that come out and don't fine tune these models are going to be very useful. I don't think they're going to. They're probably going to be around for a long time, but I don't think that's going to be the main use case in the way that we apply this technology to businesses. Fine tuning is where I think things are going.
Yeah, that's super interesting, man. And it's always been like that. Like there's a new technology coming out. There's so many people who get into the wave, but then 95% of the tools or ideas are going to die out, right? And only kind of the ones that stick and iterate and follow where this is going will be having a chance for the long run. So interesting to see whether your prediction is going to be where we're going. Since there's many people who are coming from the so-called HR, people management, recruitment space listening to the podcast, I wonder what would be some ideas for them. I mean, you know how much and how long it takes for somebody from this profession to the whole recruitment process, especially when it comes to large organizations, all the communication, creating ads, then pre-selection, like all these kind of things. Can you give us a bit of ideas of what could these people from this department, so to say, this industry do to optimize their work using AI?
Okay, cool. So we already, before GPT, we've already been using HR. Most big companies have been using a version of AI that would kind of skim a CV of a applicant, somebody that would apply to a job, and then find the correct keywords to decide whether or not this contact moves forward. Well, right now we're able to do that entire process much better by teaching the model what a great CV looks like. And then it's able to contextually understand, even if somebody kind of misses the correct keywords, it's still able to contextually understand whether or not that's a good application or a bad one. So, just providing a better insight into, whenever you receive mass applications, to go through all of that contextually to really understand those people and to figure out which is the right candidate. And we can train the model to understand what a great application looks like. So I think that's one obvious use case. Just
want to stop you here.
Sure. Yeah.
Imagine you are HR person, right?
Yeah.
And now you open the ChatGPT or whatever model is in front of you. Give me the step by step. What exactly are you going to write and text to the language model?
Okay.
What's the first step, the second step, the third step, right?
Okay, so the first thing that I would do is essentially I would try and create a data set. So I would take a look at what a great example of a CV looks like and times, 100 or 200, right? So we want many, many, many different examples of great CVs. And then we're able to, this is going to be too long for the chat interface. So we're not essentially able to use ChatGPT for this next step. We need to use the API integration to be able to fine tune it, which is anyone interested can find. There's already many great videos and guides on how to do that, but you can go through. You can look that up. So that would be the next step. But by creating that data set and pushing it up into the OpenAI environment, you're able to create a new variation of GPT, which is tailored to you, fine-tuned for that specific purpose. And then what you're able to do is essentially create prompts around that and say, read this PDF, from one candidate, and let me know how what the fit is like. I'm not sure which parameters they would like to look at and how they would like to classify this information. So if we had a HR person here, we'd be able to go through a little bit of an interview and figure out what are the specific things that they should be looking at, and what are the metrics that they would kind of come up with. And then you could essentially prompt it to ask it how well that application reflects the ideal application, how good is the match, and what the GPT prediction is, how well this person is going to fit into the actual position that they're looking to fill. So I think that's the process that kind of brainstorming it, how I would approach it. And then the second part, I think, where HR could find a lot of use case is in just training people, because it's the GPT model is really good at creating tests. You could teach it on a bunch of content and then just ask it to create a test out of this, just so that people can input, fill out a form, and then you could again read that form with GPT and figure out what kind of mistakes they did, what's correct, what's not correct. What the structure and flow is like, what this person is like based on the answers. You could sort of gauge a little bit about them completely automatically without having to even interface the person. And I think potentially you could interview people if you showed it what a great interview looks like. And if you did that, hundreds of times or hundreds of times, and you teach it what a great interview looks like, what are great questions to ask, and what are great responses to those questions. You could again just run completely automated interviews. If you imagine somebody sits behind a chat bot, they think that they're chatting with a person on the other side, but in fact that they're essentially chatting with the GPT model, which gives them further questions or clarifications on their part, and just tries to figure out who this person is and whether or not they would fit well into the trained version of the model, whether or not do they look like the type of person that would fit in well with the company or not. So I think part of the HR process can be sort of enhanced. Some of it can be automated, and that I think is going to provide a great benefit to
So what I understand is for business leaders listening, many executives, managers, organizations, this could be a really good investment, because as I understand, you still need the technical support, and so you can create these frameworks, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not like for people from the people's department, HR department, to set these things up. There should be some that you need to put in the resources to set up these frameworks, right?
Yeah, for sure. So the data cleaning part is a big part of it. So it takes quite a while for you to put really high quality data together to be able to teach it. So that's a big challenge to go through. But yeah, in general, I think that this is kind of the direction we're going for. Like one of the conversations that I've overheard yesterday with EOS was as people were realizing what all of these use cases are, they started getting a little bit worried about where this is going, because they figured out they found a lot of use cases where their parts of their job could be just completely automated, or they could be taken out of the equation, not needed at all for a certain process. And I think that is kind of it's a little bit scary for most people, I think, and understandably so. And that's why I think the primary interest is going to come from the top down in companies. I don't think like workers are going to be suggesting this technology just so that they can get
And that's what
replaced.
I'm interested to hear, because we talk about all these super interesting ideas and applications, but for the common business leader,
Mhm.
they're still kind of trying to figure out how, who do I get on board to help me to set these things up? Even if this is a great idea, how do we find the right kind of suppliers slash providers of this kind of services, setting up AI to work for our company's needs? Like, where do we go, right? Like, I think that's the question everybody's trying to figure out. How do I go and find the right kind of suppliers, I don't know, companies that can help us set up AI models?
I think we're such an early stage of fine tuning in general that it's really difficult to find people who are super experienced at it. I don't think you can essentially hire people who have already 5 or 10 years of experience in this field, because this field doesn't exist for that long, right? So that's a challenge that we're tackling with, right? We're learning as we go. We're building these systems, really trying to listen to companies and their needs to figure out what is the correct process to try and train a model, what kind of on what kind of data, and what the expected outputs are going to look like. So I think this is going to be an ongoing thing, where more and more companies are going to start offering these services, fine tuning and all sorts of areas. They're probably going to specialize for certain areas. Might be HR or content, or whatever other use case that we actually find. And then, yeah, I think it's just going to take a little while for a lot of these companies to get established in the fine tuning field. Right now, I think it's kind of difficult to find somebody that's really good at this and knows how to fine tune models, and that can just guide a company through this process. We've started doing this back in December. So I think it's still going to take some time for everyone to really develop the capabilities to do that and to help companies. But that's something that we're tackling and we're pushing forward every single day.
Right. Stay tuned, guys. Keep updated on what's going on out there, and you can be potentially ahead of everybody else if you already now allocate some resources. At least uh, keep updated what's out there. As Tim said, like, he's subscribed to all these newsletters and podcasts and places where you can hear about the latest tools. Can you maybe share some of these resources, like, that you're following, that people, if they're interested, they can go and follow?
Sure. So we could go through them. I just maybe would like to point out something. Like in general, I think people should pay close attention to fine tuning, not so much to the actual tools that are coming out. I think that's super important, because most of these tools, they really have to be specific to a really specific need. An example of this, I just gave an example before with Enhance by Adobe, which cleans sound, which is great. If you have that specific use case, that's something that you should be looking at. In general, I think it'd be really helpful. And one thing that I've started to do is to listen to university lectures surrounding AI and machine learning in general. I think that's going to be a topic that most people should go through. I know a lot of people kind of hate the idea of going back to college and studying and all of that stuff. I just do think that this technology is such a big breakthrough, where we should go back, study what machine learning is, how it looks like, what are some of the key challenges, and how we approach this. Because I do think that in the future, we're not just going to look at fine tuning models. A lot of companies are going to develop their own AI models. I think Facebook is in a great position to do that. Google is already doing that, and it's going to be super interesting what kind of capabilities they generate out of that. Like, for example, one thing that I think could be coming is just if Google manages to get BART off the ground and working really well, we could probably expect that to be inside Google Drive, inside your documents. If it's inside your documents, you can do a lot of word processing, figure out where things are going to go, translate documents really well. I don't know if you've been, Stoyan, if you've been playing with GPT 4.0, but it's incredibly good at translating stuff. So, things like on certain levels and certain tests, it's better. The 4.0 is better in German than 3.5 was in English, which is just incredible, right? And the translations that we're getting out of that are just a huge step up, including in Slovenian, which is funnily enough. It can write incredibly well. Yeah, it can write Slovenian incredibly well. 4.0. It was just a big step up from 3.5. I think the main thing that people should focus on is on learning. First of all, what machine learning is, and then the second thing they should learn about is everything they can about fine-tuning models. And they should pay as little attention as possible to the massive tools coming out right now, because I don't think they're going to stick around, or they're not going to provide a huge value to society and to companies in general. Whereas if companies start to pick up knowledge about fine-tuning, and you can even go to the OpenAI website, they have a huge and really good guide on how to fine-tune their own models. I think those are the resources that businesses should be looking at and studying intensely right now. Not so much about just following the latest trends or what's coming out, or all of these millions of tools that everyone's building and add-ons and all of that stuff. So I think if I were to give any specific advice, it'd be that just focus on this one topic, fine-tuning, and learn everything you can about it.
Yeah, I'm listening to you. I'm just reflecting on all these crypto experts who became NFT experts, who are now AI experts, right? Like, so be careful, be careful who you follow. There's going to be a lot of pseudo experts out there and pseudo solutions. So, like, who are the practitioners? Who are the people who are actually doing stuff? Who are the, what are the solutions that are providing you with some useful output? So be careful, but of course, be curious and go out there, try different things. And since there's also many people from the world of startups, entrepreneurs. If we're looking at today, what could founders, entrepreneurs do in terms of using ChatGPT, for example? I mean, the title of today is how to hire and train ChatGPT to work instead of you. So how could startup founders utilize ChatGPT, for example, in a practical manner?
Okay, so again, the way that you hire and train ChatGPT is to fine tune it to provide the outputs that you essentially need. I think the first use case for this technology is going to be big companies who already have a lot of data that they could potentially clean, and then based on that they could fine tune the model. I think it's going to be super, relatively easy for those companies to do that. As a startup, when you don't have a lot of data or a lot of content that you could potentially fine tune this model on, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge. So, but the other way that you could approach this, and let's say, let's kind of try and come up with a startup today, right? And that startup might be something like, let's build a tool to help you value post on LinkedIn, for example. Let's say we're building a tool that helps you write great posts for LinkedIn, right? Okay. Let's say we're a startup that we want to do that, right? The way that we could use ChatGPT, or specifically GPT, is to look at, for example, really great LinkedIn posts, like from multiple people, from multiple influencers. We could take copy and paste all of their posts, put it into a data set and fine tune the model based around that. And then what we're able to do is, sell that tool or offer it to the world, so that people can come in. They can, sort of maybe pick a type of LinkedIn post that they'd like to write about, and then just input, just certain basic stuff, like, for example, what the topic is, or, maybe one or two tips that they'd really like to focus on, narrow on to, and then just generate and have a fully finished LinkedIn post, or a series of LinkedIn posts or things like that. That's, I think, a way that people and startups could sort of start using this tool immediately, and start fine-tuning for different use cases, because I think there's going to be many different use cases to fine-tune models on. So I think that is kind of the main opportunity for them.
What about coding? Like, a lot of people
or cold
post
email.
about no, just not cold email, but like I was talking about
Okay.
coding and programming. Like
Okay,
a lot
coding.
of
Yeah.
developers say that they're saving a lot of time on the. I'm not a developer, right? So I'm just guessing here, but I hear a lot of those developers saying, "Hey, this can give us quite a bit of the groundwork. Maybe not like the perfect code, but like it give us some base 70-80% of the code that we can then fine tune, right? Is that something that startups can also utilize so they can save
Yeah.
time and mental energy on?
It's super funny because like my two of my brothers are both developers, and
Okay.
they both code pretty much nonstop using GPT to help
Okay.
them do that.
How,
So
how
they
do you do that? You still have to
yeah,
be really good
you
in
still have to be in
asking the
control.
right questions, right?
Yeah. So you need to kind of understand where you want to take things,
Mm.
and then you can ask it to generate that code. And then it's still on the programmer to kind of analyze that code and say, hey, you used an inefficient method of doing this. Change that method to this kind of method, and then it's going to edit that code and provide an output that surprisingly works.
It's like
I've
you have an
even
intern, right? You have an intern, and like
yeah,
you give them a task, and then you come back and it's like, hey, this is great, but can you do it in this different way?
exactly, and that's I think that's actually the scary part. I think this is where we're getting into the actual real life implications of who's likely to lose their jobs or lose opportunities first. And I think it's juniors, right? People who don't really have enough experience, where a senior can now just produce so much output that they don't typically need a junior who doesn't really know how to code, because they already have an AI that they could instead invest a little bit of time into, teach it how to solve these problems and get much better output. I think programming, we're still a long way off from these tools being able to completely independently code things. But potentially, they could at this stage provide better outputs than someone that's completely junior to the field. So yeah, or for example in copywriting, instead of for example, a senior copywriter spending time teaching a junior on how to write, they could spend that time invested into the AI model, into the fine-tune model, provide more examples, more details, and teach that the AI how to write. And then you kind of don't really need a junior. You already have a machine that sort of acts as a pretty good copywriter. And I think that's where we're going to start to see some problems. I think it's a super scary time to be in college and just have zero experience in your working field, and just hoping to enter the workforce in 3, 4, 5 years down the line, when a lot of the stuff becomes way more
And by
widespread.
the way,
And
that's a really good point here. And for those of you listening who are probably in this kind of age group, like I don't know, 18 to 23,
yeah,
if you're students yet, stop just expecting that you graduate and you do your exams at school and you're gonna be fine. No, you gotta step up. Like no
yeah,
matter what, you gotta step up. You gotta be prepared. Like you go out there and do stuff. What are the kind of skills that you can acquire that you're already in college, right? Like volunteer at festivals, organize conferences, start a project with a friend, do stuff, be out there, volunteer to some great organizations out there or professionals. You want to be a photographer? Amazing. Who are the best photographers in town? Go and ask them, hey, can I help you? I can do anything. I can make the coffee. I can set up the lights. I'll do anything. I just want to learn. Upskill yourself.
yeah.
You can't just expect that I'm going to graduate and they're going to give me a job. That doesn't work anymore. You'll be left
Yeah.
behind.
And it kind of hasn't been that way for a little while now, right? Where people would have to get some experience before they got hired. But I think like also use GPT at every stage of your studies. I know a lot of professors are really apprehensive about this technologies, about students cheating on certain assignments and just make coming up with the answers with GPT. I think that's the smartest thing that they could do. I think students who get super proficient at using this technology are just going to have an advantage over everyone else. So do use it. Just use it for every single thing you can. Learn, dive deep into it, and just try and master this technology, because 3-5 years down the line, we're still going to need a lot of people who know how to use this technology really well. And if that's you, then you'll have a much better chance of actually landing a job.
And Tim, since we're getting close to the end of this episode, I'm just curious to hear, where are we going? What's your prediction of where AI is going to take us in the next few to several years?
Okay, so I think like in the short term, a few years timeline, more and more companies are going to figure out that fine tuning is where the game is at, right? It's not about prompting. It's not about using all of these hundreds of different tools that come out. They're going to figure out, okay, fine tuning is super important. How do we approach this? And then they're going to build probably they're going to tell their IT departments to learn about fine tuning, and as they do, they'll figure out they need to bring on board more talent to be able to tackle those challenges, because they're really specific challenges. And they're going to figure out, hey, this is something that's super important. We need to start fine tuning these models for ourselves, and this is what lets us create these incredible use cases and automate a lot of the work. And I think a lot of the companies are going to start moving into this field of fine-tuning these models for themselves and automating a lot of the processes they have. And as we go through this process, I think people are going to start to lose jobs, and or at least have their work hours greatly reduced. Or for example, imagine you have 20 copywriters hired right now to produce content, and you could potentially get that down to 2 copywriters, right? So I think that's where we're going in the short term, in the next few years. Company, as it's not really clear where we are economically, what's going on with the financial markets around the world. But I think a lot of companies already, they're already cutting jobs, not hiring as many people. And when they find out that they could potentially increase their output and decrease their workforce, I think a lot of companies are going to jump on this, which is going to lead to all kinds of societal issues. I think sad to say, I think that's where we're going. And I do think that the governments around the world aren't quick enough to act on this. So I do think it's going to be a little bit of turbulence ahead of us when it comes to the adoption of this tech.
What could employees out there do to get ready for when these moments start to come?
So if we kind of take a look at big picture, years and years down the line, and we don't know when this will happen, right? But potentially we're moving into direction of general AI. So sort of the quick way of putting it is an actual being that can learn, right, and adapt and all of that. Once we hit that period, I think it's, for a lot of people, it's essentially going to be game over when it comes to their jobs. Stoyan, also content creation, things like that. All of that stuff can be automated by a machine that's much smarter than us. And I think it's time that we start to have this conversation now and figure out how can we adapt society to still have meaning for people, especially people who aren't working physical manual jobs. I think those aren't going to go away. It's super difficult to automate the work of an electrician, for example. We're not going to build it's going to be extremely expensive to build a robot that can move exactly how humans can move, to go around your house and fix stuff and all of that. So I don't think manual work is going away at all. I think that's going to be the primary way that people are still going to be employed. But everything else, especially things that have to do with sort of working with the computer, I think a lot of that stuff can be just completely automated, and people are going to struggle to find a new opportunity in the same field as everyone moves towards complete automation. I think it's time that we start having this conversation, especially in our governments. I think that's where we should be having this conversation the most, and figure out what does the future look like? How do we work in a completely automated world? Like what purpose do humans have? Like, how do we make sure that people are safe, that they feel that they have purpose in life? And I think those are the conversations that we need to start having now, because I do think that this is the world that we're moving into. Maybe not in 2 years, maybe not in 5 years, maybe not in 10 years, but could be 20 years, or it could be shorter. We essentially don't know how quickly we're moving towards this technology.
Especially with the exponential growth of all the technologies, it might be surprisingly fast we get there. But thank you so much, Tim, for being with us today, for sharing all these ideas. I'm sure everybody listening would take some ideas and come up with inspiration of what exactly they can do today, or how do they prepare for the future that's coming. So thanks for being with us. And just final question, where could people find you, get in touch with you, and maybe if you give us an idea, I don't know if it's a secret, I know you're working on a big project right now. What are you working on? What's your focus these days?
Okay, cool. So yeah, like people can follow me on LinkedIn or Facebook, like mostly LinkedIn. I think that's the best way to get in touch. I have an email list that I'm preparing, that I'm going to start launching and write more content about AI. But if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll be able to know you'll know all about that. So right now we're working essentially on fine-tuning models for companies. We come inside a company, we take a look at what their specific use case is, and we fine-tune those models for them to build these automated systems. Where you have certain examples and demos that we're happy to share with anyone interested in sort of this type of tech. But we're really deeply focusing on automating the content output for companies. So things like sales emails, sales ads on Facebook, or blogs and landing pages and product descriptions and all of that. That's something that we're focusing deeply on right now, and building automated systems on fine-tuned models to just outperform, or at least perform as good as a human copywriter would.
Love it. So everybody listening to the podcast, make sure to go and find Tim on LinkedIn, follow him. Email list is coming. I just want to give a kind of a shout out to the people listening. There's Gregor, who's been joining and saying, Tim, thank you for sharing. Keep up the good work. Hope to see you soon. There's also Pia. So Tim, help me to read her name, please.
Pia Gustincic.
Pia
Hi, PM.
She's saying great stuff. Thank you. Thank you so much, Pia. Thanks everybody for joining us live, listening to the podcast, offering suggestions. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to Productivity Mastery. This episode 144. So that means there's 143 more episodes with amazing people like Tim. And we're going to keep bringing you amazing people on a weekly basis. We actually had a huge guest coming next week as well. His name is Steve Cardigan, and he was LinkedIn's first chief HR officer. He's fantastic. He's wrote a book, Workquake, so about the future of work. So make sure to tune in next week as well. Subscribe to the channel, share the episode, let us know what you think, and make sure that you are well aware about what's happening with AI. And if you're not enough, follow Tim. So that's what you gotta do. Thanks so much once again. Thank you, Tim, for being with us. And
Thank
see
you,
you once
Stan, for
again
inviting me.
at the next episode of Productivity Mastery. Ciao.